Well, first and foremost, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Miami, and welcome to Florida International University. It's a pleasure to see some friends, some mentors, new friends that have traveled all the way from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm looking at you, Elijah. Where are you? Elijah Mooney, all the way from Nairobi. Also from Santiago de Chile, Osvaldo Rosales. Nice to see you, sir. Also, Dr. Juan Manuel Aguilar from Mexico. Thank you so much for coming. And basically everywhere from the US, and even some folks who are joining us from London who will be speaking later on today. And then also anybody who's in the chat, if you might be from another country, just put it in the chat and we will make sure to acknowledge that. I did want to start off with a somber note and just recognize the incredible privilege that we have of being here in Miami, having this conference or this forum while war rages in the Middle East. And so our hearts and our prayers go out to the people of Israel and then also the people of Ukraine still going through the terrible war over there against Russian aggression. For those who don't know me, my name is Leland Lazarus. I'm the Associate Director for the Gordon Institute for Public Policy at FIU. We are basically the university's think tank where we focus on research and programming regarding national security issues in Latin America and the Caribbean, US-China relations, China-Latin America relations, and cybersecurity. We are a university of 56,000 students. That's one of the top 10 largest universities in the whole nation. We are a Hispanic serving institution. 60% of our student body is Hispanic. The Wall Street Journal recently ranked FIU as one of the four best public universities in the nation. And I will say, I might be biased, that we have some of the smartest and most driven student body in this nation and then also around the world. And don't take my word for it. There will be some students here today. I encourage you to talk to them during breaks, during lunch, and you'll see why I say what I say. Now, first and foremost, none of this would have been possible without the incredible work from the FIU team. And I first want to give a shout out to my brother, my right-hand man, Robbie Furton, who's there in the back. I have a nickname for Robbie. It's Robbie the Eagle Eye Furton because he really finds every single detail that we really need. And so I really couldn't have done this without him. So thank you, Robbie. Also to Miss Patty Cepero over there in the black and in the sky blue. Patty is our administrative director for administrative affairs. And so everything from scheduling the shuttle to take you guys here, to the wonderful bagels and fruit that you guys are enjoying now, to the lunch that you'll be having, and the flights and lodging, everything in between. You got to thank that wonderful, wonderful lady over there. So thank you so much, Patty. I also want to thank the various FIU institutes and departments that also helped out. Every department from the Asian Studies Department to Africana Studies, to the Green School of International and Public Affairs. I see Professor Tom Breslin is here as well. Also want to give a shout out to Professor Julie Zheng and others who may be here as well. And of course, I want to thank the various institutional partners. We've been the brain trust in really helping to plan and organize this event. So specifically, Yanqiu Zheng over at the Social Sciences Research Council, and your colleague Yanqiu Tatiana Karayanis, who unfortunately got sick last minute, so she could not be able to join us, but we wish her a speedy recovery. Also to Paul Nantulya of the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, to Juliana Gonzalez Jauregui of Flaxo, Argentina, to Bob Wakesa of the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, to Henry Tugendhat, I think I saw Henry over there, from the US Institute of Peace, thank you so much for coming, and to David Shullman from the Atlantic Council's Global China Hub, thank you so much. Paul, we were just talking outside and we realized that, man, it was just in February where we met on the sidelines of another China conference that was organized by Evan Ellis and his team over at the U.S. Army War College, where we sort of conceived of a forum like this, bringing together African and Latin American and Caribbean experts. And we were saying, oh, this would potentially be the first time that something like this has ever happened. The truth of the matter is we were simply just following in the footsteps of wise African, Latin American, and Caribbean leaders who are already doing this trend. These are two continents separated by a vast ocean, shackled together by the painful original sin of slavery and colonialism. I'm a product of that. I consider myself an Afro-Latino. My family comes from Panama. And of course, our ancestors came to Latin America from the African slave trade. But now, leaders from across the continents are coming together, and they're building relationships in interesting ways, from trade and investment to cultural ties to even security, with Kenya recently stepping up to lead the multinational force in Haiti. This past May, Colombian Vice President Francia Marquez, she went on a 3-country tour to South Africa, Kenya, and Ethiopia. And in July, Barbados' Prime Minister Mia Mottley, she was the keynote speaker at the African Union's People-to-People Global Forum. And so these are the kinds of trends of linkages that are already happening, regardless of whether this forum is going to happen or not. But one other trend that, of course, crosses the continent is the growing influence and presence of the People's Republic of China and various policy banks and entities, state-owned enterprises, you name it. This year is the 10th anniversary of China's Belt and Road Initiative. And since then, 52 of the 54 African countries are signatories of the Belt and Road. And in Latin America and the Caribbean, that number is 22 out of 33. To the Southcom folks, I'm adding Mexico and Barbados to that number. The truth of the matter is, many of these projects, many of these initiatives are providing economic growth in certain areas, in certain countries, but some of them are also causing environmental damage, labor violations, corruption. The point of the matter is there's nuance, right? And so my encouragement today is for all of us to really lean into that nuance and really bring it out in the various panels that we're going to have today. It's our hope that all of us, experts on China in our own various ways, that we'll learn from each other, that will make meaningful connections, that will highlight concrete ways for African, Latin American, and Caribbean policymakers and leaders and everyday people to maximize the benefits from and maintain a robust and healthy relationship with the PRC and its various entities, while also minimizing threats and risks to their sovereignty and to their democracies. And I have absolutely no doubt that the ideas that we generate today will translate into specific solutions that will benefit the people from across the continents. And so I'll end with a story. Also this past July, the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, he attended the 50th anniversary of the CARICOM, the Caribbean Community. There was a summit in Trinidad and Tobago. And at that summit, he said, and I quote, "Let's come together as Africa and the Caribbean and Latin America and do the best we can for ourselves and our people. If we are determined to join forces, there is no one who can impede that." Well, today, let's join forces on research, on policy recommendations, on a plan of action today, tomorrow, and for years to come. So thank you so much. Now we have some opening remarks from other institutional partners. The first is Paul Nantulya from the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Leland, thank you so much. I wouldn't really call myself an institutional partner, but I'm really a personal friend of this initiative. It was I think it was in May or some early on this year when Leland and myself and a few other colleagues, Evan, where's Bob, by the way? I didn't see him. Bob Wekesa. Or he might be joining us online. And we were at the U.S. Army War College, and there was a panel on Africa, there was a panel on Latin America, and there was so much overlap, similarities, parallels, and we said, look, there might be a need for us to sort of get together and to think through experts from Latin America, experts from Africa, to try and look at Chinese activities, different Chinese actors, to see if there might be lessons that could be shared. And really, this was the birth of this particular initiative, which should unfold to other follow-up initiatives. So it has really been an honor and a pleasure for me to have been invited to be part of the thinking team that put this together. I think we meet at a very critical time, ladies and gentlemen. I think it was yesterday or the day before, the Chinese government released a report that said that the Belt and Road Initiative is an alternative model for development and an alternative model for financing. I think this is how the People's Republic of China would like the Belt and Road to be seen, particularly in its 10th anniversary. That was quite interesting. This program is not without its problems, and I think discussing its problems, discussing opportunities, looking at how recipient countries might be able to leverage it better in ways that guard against odious debt, guard against all the other elements that Leland was talking about, such as environmental damage. So I think it's an opportunity to think through. Our friends over at the Boston University China Center have come up with some very interesting research, an interactive database of all Chinese lending since 2000, which of course is when the Forum for China and China-Africa Cooperation took off. And they found that China has lent, under the Belt and Road program, has extended, committed, whichever way you look at it, 330 billion to developing countries under the Belt and Road plan. That seems like a big figure. We can look at all the different individual projects, such as the railway in Kenya, which I'm sure our colleague Elijah will talk about. But over the past 2 years, that funding has reduced to less than 2 billion a year. So what does this mean? Is the Belt and Road running out of steam? Is it continuing? Are we seeing Belt and Road 2.0? These are questions that I'll just throw out there for us to think about. And Henry, it's good to see you. So lots of activity around this. The government of Kazakhstan is hosting a series of discussions looking at the impact of the Belt and Road Initiative in Central Asia. Early this year, the government of Tanzania hosted a conference that was looking at the impact of the Belt and Road Initiative in East Africa. And I was fortunate I was in Tanzania at that time, and I was able to see this conference from a distance and to pick out some key themes out of that. So it's clear that the People's Republic of China and its partners in different parts of the world are basically organizing these reflection meetings, again, to popularize this initiative. I guess the People's Republic of China would like to send a message that the initiative is not dead, and so on. And I think it's also reacting to pressure and to a lot of critique and a lot of criticism that has come up in recent years. So again, major marketing effort on the part of China. I think there are 4 issues which for me are really critical between these two regions, Africa and Latin America. The first is, what are the parallels? And in fact, this meeting that we had, this side meeting that we had over in Carlisle, I think built on earlier conversations that we've been having, Evan, with other colleagues. What are the parallels? What are the contrasts in engagement? What lessons do we think the People's Republic of China and its various entities are picking from one region and transferring to another? Are there lessons? Are there ways that that is happening? And what can colleagues from Africa share with colleagues from Latin America and the Caribbean and other parts of the world in terms of what Chinese engagement looks like in the region? And finally, what is on the horizon? So for me, these are the four elements that I'll be thinking about. And once again, Leland and colleagues, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this process. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Paul. Now I'd like to invite David Shullman, Director of the Global China Hub at the Atlantic Council, for your opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Leland. Thanks to FIU. It's great to be here. It's great to co-host this fantastic event alongside so many excellent organizations that are doing really important work. As Leland said, I'm Senior Director of the Global China Hub at the Atlantic Council. And when Leland, who we're lucky enough to have also as a fellow at the Atlantic Council, asked whether we would co-host this event with FIU and others, the immediate reaction was of course yes. And the reason is, this is entirely consistent with what we're trying to do at the Atlantic Council, and specifically with our work looking at China in the Global South, which is effectively merging or marrying an understanding of China's strategic aims, its methods of influence, which are of course very different across different countries, across the developing world, the impact on countries that China's engaging, with an understanding of what's actually happening in individual countries across the Global South by having an intentional partnership with countries and with experts in all the countries across these different regions in which China is engaging, to benefit from their insights, their knowledge of the landscape and the specific context in each country in which China is engaging, and an understanding of what's to be done to ensure that engagement with China does benefit the citizens of those countries, as Leland has laid out so well. And so I think the key here is to look at this not just from one angle or even a couple different angles, but to really have a holistic understanding of what China's engagement with these different countries looks like. So not just from the security angle, not just from an economic angle, focused on the Belt and Road and financing and debt issues, although of course that's critical, as we've already heard, and we'll have a lot of discussion of that in the first panel, I'm sure. But we also want to look at the information space. We also want to look at what's happening at the governance level. And we want to look at this from the tech domain as well. And not just when we're looking at these issues, and this may be obvious to those in this room, but in DC it's less obvious, not just looking at this through that US-China competition lens, right? And so to take the tech example, for example, it's not just will or will not each country go the Huawei route when they're thinking about how to build out their ICT infrastructure, but what's the local state of tech innovation in an individual country? Which emerging technologies are critical for each country in terms of hitting their particular development targets? And how does China's engagement fit in there? And what should that mean for instance, US and also allied private sector investment and risk calculations? And what's the role of US agencies like the Development Finance Corporation and others in helping to spur on that investment? So it's great that we're going to be covering so many of these disparate issues with local experts today, and I like how Leland put it, really leaning into that nuance, because it is a subject that requires deep nuance across these various different issues. And as has already been mentioned, I think the really important additional element to this gathering is this learning across regions and sharing ideas, and really looking at the modalities of Chinese engagement and how it's different across different countries. Before I came to the Atlantic Council, I was at the International Republican Institute, which supports democracy around the world. We put together an event in India about 4 years ago that brought perspectives from all different countries across the developing world to talk about China. And in that event, afterwards and during the event, multiple people came up and said, it's amazing how many commonalities and similarities we're discovering in terms of what we're facing with China, the benefits that we're getting, but also the challenges that we're facing in engaging with China. And I think now there's more of an understanding, I think, of the importance of these kinds of cross-regional events, but it's still far too rare. And I think people are reading each other's writing, they're reading different case studies of what China's engagement in countries looks like, but to actually be here in person and to create those connections, it's so valuable. And I think it is particularly important, as Leland has mentioned, to be doing this specifically in the Africa-Latin America context. As has been said, I'm fairly sure this is pretty unique, and I think more often than not, we're set up with these lessons learned and information sharing engagements with taking the Asia context and lessons from Asia and bringing them to other regions. But I think there's real value in making this comparison between two regions where China's history of engagement, its cultural influence, the role of the Chinese ethnic minority is not as extensive as in most countries in East Asia. China does, of course, have a long history of engagement in Africa, in particular, going back to the middle of the last century. It's focused greater attention on Africa than in Latin America, at least in the last several decades since reform and opening and China's rapid economic growth since the 80s. So it's often said that Latin America is a decade or so behind engagement with China that we've seen in Africa and can therefore learn from the pitfalls and successes that African countries have faced. I think that is absolutely the case. I think that's true, and I'm sure we'll discuss some of that today. But I think it's also the reverse, right? And there's cases where there are things that are happening or have happened in Latin America that can be brought to bear in understanding what's happening in Africa. And I think even more importantly, there are so many current and new phenomena emerging that Africa, Latin American countries, and the rest of the world are all learning about collectively, right? And thinking about and learning about how are we going to deal with these challenges, from AI supercharged information operations to the mad dash for critical minerals and many other issues. And so it's really critical and indispensable that we compare notes on those subjects. And I think, these are all kind of the questions that those in the US government, in allied governments, and of course those engaging China and trying to determine the best course for that engagement have about how to manage China's highly consequential turn to focusing more on the global South as a strategic entity than ever before. Far more willing now under Xi Jinping to proclaim its intention to, as Leland mentioned, offer an alternative non-democratic model for developing states, and far more willing to use its leverage, economic, technological, informational, and otherwise, to ensure that countries make policy choices consistent with China's interests and values. China may be slowing economically. I'm sure we'll talk about that today, shift and pullback in some BRI financing and so forth. And that will have an impact in China's role in the global South. But make no mistake, this strategic shift to focusing on the developing world, or one might say back to focusing on the developing world, given China's historic claim as the self-proclaimed leader of the developing world. This shift is here to stay, and US-China competition, strategic competition, is also here to stay. And the need for countries in both Latin America and Africa to achieve their development goals has also never been more pressing coming out of the pandemic. So events like this one are really critical to ensuring that countries in Africa and Latin America can navigate that competition, navigate relations with China in a way that, as the conference agenda has it, perfectly maximizes benefits for their citizenry at minimal cost to their sovereignty. So I'm really proud to be a part of this event, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Last but not least, I'd like to invite Yanqiu Zheng from the Social Sciences Research Council for your opening remarks.
Morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. So my name is Yanqiu, and I am a program officer at the Social Science Research Council, mainly focusing on China and the Global South. And it's really an honor to be invited by Leland and his wonderful team to be a co-convener of this great event. And I also want to thank particularly American Airlines for getting me out of New York on time this morning, and also my Lyft driver for closely avoiding crashing into the car in front of us on the freeway, really. So, okay, I'm really glad I'm here in one piece. But we have heard several opening remarks from the co-conveners here, and Leland and Paul and David have given us a lot of food for thought, right? What we can discuss here. And as a representative of an institution which prides itself as being the network of networks, I think I want to give a different perspective in my remarks here, and that is the context of where this convening is taking place. Because we know that in the past decade, at least, China and the Global South has really grown into, if you will, a burgeoning cottage industry, right? And in fact, just today, exactly today, I noticed that at Harvard, their Asia Center and Center for African Studies is organizing Asia-Africa relations, its status and possible trajectories. And at Columbia today, their Critical Chinese Humanities Colloquium is organizing a hybrid event called Aspirations, China and the Global South. So as you can see, right, we are not in a vacuum here. We are competing with Cambridge, Massachusetts, and New York. But I'm sure Miami beats those places in so many other ways. But one thing I have noticed is in this convening, we have a healthy proportion, a good proportion of scholars who are actually based in the Global South, rather than just scholars based in the Global North or based in China talking to each other, right? And I think that is really something we're at the Social Science Research Council in our own China and the Global South work, we really try to elevate the visibility of scholars and institutions based in the Global South. And also here, it's not just a one-off invitation, I'm sure, and because there's a lot of longer-term work to do. And how do we include those scholars and institutions in this kind of long-term, equitable and inclusive and ethical collaboration? And I think that's also something we can think about in addition to those concrete questions we have just heard from Paul, from Leland, and from David. So I think I will just end my brief remarks here and let the conference run its course. But again, thank you.